You might think starting a business is an impossible task. You might even know the stats around the number of businesses that fail every after 3 years, which is why in this video I'm going to share with you the things that I have done to start my own business, as well as the things that you can do and the things I'm actively doing to ensure that it can at least stand the test of time. Now, the real starting point for any business is not necessarily the idea. We often have many people say that for you to have a good business, you have to start with the idea. And I sort of disagree with that, even though it is important to undergo something called the ideation process. You need to understand that a good business starts from a legitimate problem that needs to be solved for a specific person who desires a specific outcome. So the real starting point for a business is never really the idea. You might have so many ideas, but it doesn't mean that every one of those ideas are worth pursuing, because not all of them can have the potential to actually become sustainable businesses. So the starting point for any business is a problem, and I'll explain what that is. One thing I would like you to understand is the reason why we are going with the approach of starting from a problem that is already existing, or a problem that is easily identified, is something I would call the painkiller versus the vitamin type of concept. When you have a pain in your body and you maybe have a headache or something is just not feeling right, you're going to go to a painkiller because you know that that painkiller is going to immediately get rid of that pain, or at least numb it, so that you are not able to feel that pain. Whereas when it comes to vitamins, not everyone necessarily sees that you need vitamins. So I remember I was a little unwell not so long ago, and I had to go to the clinic, and in as much as I wanted the pain to go away, they gave me the necessary painkillers, but they also recommended that I have some vitamins in my body to also sort of help regulate certain things in my body so that I'm able to function at full capacity. So I ended up getting the vitamins. But this is all a demand problem, right? Because when you look at it from face value, you might think, okay, what I really need is for the pain to go away. But the underlying problem might need vitamins in your body. So here's how I look at this concept of the painkiller versus the vitamin problem. The painkiller is something that already has existing demand. There are people who are facing that problem, and the demand is readily available on the market. So it is very, very easy for them to just go to someone who has painkillers and they will buy that, and their problem will immediately be satisfied. The vitamin, on the other hand, might require you to develop some sort of demand around that, because it is not a problem that people know that they actually have. They need some explaining to. They need to be educated on why they need the vitamin for them to be able to function. So that is the major difference between the painkiller and the vitamin. So you just need to identify a problem that has existing demand, or where you can actually create demand by virtue of educating your people or letting them know that you are offering a solution to a particular service. So now that we understand that for you to start a business, you need to start from a very well-defined problem, you need to understand, say, now we can move from this thing of a problem to the ideation. Now you need to figure out the idea. You need to identify where the demand is for your service and how it is that you're going to tap into that demand. So you can do this in several ways. So of course, you figure out where the demand is. This is the ideation process. You figure out where the demand is. You figure out if there is existing demand, if it is an observable demand, or it is something that your competitors are already actively doing. Because when you do this, you will discover that it will be easier for you to start a business, because you're already starting from something that people already are aware needs to be solved. You can either observe the problem, you can either identify an existing problem, or you can check what your competitor is already doing and do something differently from them, so that you attract the type of customers that you need for that, for you to actually have a proper business. Now, after you do the ideation process, you need to conduct a process known as the validation of the idea. So you need to validate the idea, and there are several ways for you to be able to validate the idea, some of which include simply doing outreach to people who are probably on your contacts or on your followers list. Some of you have massive followers on your social medias, what you need to do is you need to tap into that network and reach out to them. Tell them about this idea that you have and whether or not it is something that they would be interested in investing their own money in, which goes to the second thing that you need to do when you are validating a business idea, which is getting people to commit. Do some pre-sales. Make sure that someone is willing to part with their money for the solution. And this is all before you actually even get to the building or the delivering of the service. You need to find out whether there is actual demand for the business that you want to start before you invest your time, your energy, and your attention, in this thing. You need to figure out if people are actually interested in the solution that you are offering. After you have done your validation of the idea, you need to move on to the next step, which is creating the actual offer. So in the idea validation, you're basically finding out whether or not the demand is there, it exists, and people are willing to part their money and give it to you so that you offer them that solution that you want to offer them. And if you get maybe 5 people to commit to it, it is a very good indicator to say people are actually willing to commit their finances to that, to see that the problem that you have identified is solved by you. Now you get into the offer creation. You create the offer in various ways. There's a lot of ways in which you can create the offer, and for this to actually be meaningful, you need to understand that just having the idea won't sell. You can have an idea and the idea can be really, really good, but that is not enough to build your business around. So what does creating the offer look like? You need to identify certain things. You need to identify the who, the person for whom you will be solving a certain problem for, the what will you be giving them in exchange for their money for that problem to be solved. So what is the nature of the service that you want to offer this desired market? And you also need to figure out the where are these people found? Can you identify the locations where they easily give their attention to, so that you can use those platforms to grab attention for yourself? Then you need to figure out the how fast you can actually deliver the solution to them, because this will be very crucial in determining the price that you're going to offer your service by. So there needs to be various elements for an offer to be complete and to be full and acceptable by the market. So the simple offer structure starts with, number 1, identifying your target audience. You need to identify the audience you are targeting with your good or service. So the target audience needs to have various characteristics that you need to look out for. And some of these characteristics, not so easy to identify, some of which are also easier to identify. So the target audience is determined by various character traits. Number 1, you need to make sure that the target audience is willing to pay for your service. They have the buying power. You need to make sure that your target audience has buying power. Otherwise, it is pointless to start a business and target a customer segment that isn't able to buy your product or your service, in this case, at the price at which you set it. You need to make it such that it is a target audience that is willing to buy into your solution. The next thing that you need to look for when you're creating the offer in the offer structure is you need to have a specific result. We were spelling it a little wrong. Specific result. So this target audience of yours needs to be looking for a very, very specific result, an outcome that they're looking for that will make your solution relevant to them. They need to have something, a desired state they're looking to achieve. So they need to have a specific result they're aiming for, and you need to be able to provide them with that specific result through your service. The third thing that you need to look out for in creating your offer, what you need to consider, is you need to figure out if there is a clear method of delivery, right? A clear method. So you don't just want to, because I can handle social media advertisement, then you just go straight into it. Oh, I'm a social media marketer and I can do this. There needs to be a certain structure, a certain method that you use to make sure that you get to the solution that they're looking for. So just having the skill for you to be able to do certain things is not enough. You need to figure out how certain things are going to be done. So first of all, how do you onboard the people once they make a payment? What does the delivery process look like? You need to figure out that so that you are just not doing things anyhow. There needs to be a certain level of predictability if you're going to call it a business. The fourth thing in the 4-step structure, the simple offer structure that you're creating, the fourth thing is a defined time frame. You need to give them some sort of a promise to say, when you start working with me, you're going to get your desired outcome either in X number of days or X number of hours. But there needs to be a defined time frame, a defined time frame for you to be able to give them the desired outcome that they're looking for. Otherwise, you might end up looking like a fraud, and we do not want to create frauds, right? So once you figure out the simple offer structure that you are going to create, you need to now move to the next segment of building your business, which is basically acquiring the customer. Because if there is no customer acquisition, then you don't have a business. Customer acquisition, very, very important, right? So you can acquire customers in various ways. There are various ways in which you can get your first 5 customers, even more. The process is the same depending on what outcome you're looking for. The first method is something known as warm outreach. I'll explain what that is in a second. So warm outreach is simply you reaching out to people who already know you, are already familiar with what you do, or maybe the skills you have, or maybe there is just some sort of a relationship that you have with them. So these are people who already know you. Simply reach out to them. Like I mentioned earlier on, you might have a very good number of people who are following you on your social media. You go there and inbox each and every one of those people and tell them about what you're doing. And because they already know you, they're going to obviously welcome you even much easier, because there is already some sort of rapport that exists and you don't need to build it from scratch, if you understand what I mean. The second method you can use to acquire your customer is cold outreach. I am trying to describe the 2 types of outreach first before I get into the other methods, the other 2 methods you can use to acquire your customers. So cold outreach is the second thing. Now with cold outreach, it is simply the opposite of warm outreach. With cold outreach, you are identifying people who have never heard about you, have never heard of you or made contact with you in any shape, way or form, and you are telling them about your product or service. It is very hard to do cold outreach because most people aren't welcoming to salespeople, but it is a very good point you can also start with, because one of those people you cold outreach might end up becoming your first customer, and sometimes might even end up becoming a long-term loyal customer. The next method you can use to attract your first customer is something known as content creation. Simply creating content like this. The third one, just create content. The content should be in relation to the solution you want to give your target audience. So the content isn't just you creating random videos or posting random things on your social media. It needs to have a purpose. You need to have an understanding of the people you are targeting with that content. You need to understand the things that actually interest them in relation to your service, and you need to understand how to create the content in a way that will grab their attention. Content creation, if done properly, will result in you having so many customers, because people will develop a certain level of rapport with you just through your content. They will develop trust when you create more content, and through that trust they can become loyal customers. I noticed I spelled customer acquisition without the R. It is important for you to have the R in the custom. It's not just a custom, but the custom needs to have the R. You get it, right? Yeah, so dry jokes alert. So the fourth thing that you can do to acquire your customer is simply running adverts. If you have some money to spare, I recommend running adverts, because it is the easiest way for you to get your customers, because when you run adverts, there is also a certain level of trust that just automatically comes with someone running an advert. You assume to say they know what they're doing. If they are willing to invest their money to tell me about their service, they must know what they're doing, and they sure as hell must be good at what they're telling me they're able to do for me. So once you figure out the ways to acquire your customer, the 4 ways to acquire your customer, now you need to figure out how you're going to do your sales. How you're going to, once they reach out, let's say they come from your content, or you reach them out, they show interest. Once you do your warm or cold outreach, you run your Facebook advertisements, they're showing genuine interest. What comes next? You need to learn how to convert them, because if they show interest, that's just one part of the funnel. Now you also need to figure out how you're going to convert them from being people who have just engaged with either your advert, your content, or your outreach, to people who are actually paying for your service. So you need to figure out your sales conversion process. You need to figure out what your sales conversion looks like, right? So how do you convert people into becoming customers? Do you just talk to them and tell them about your product, the things that you offer, and everything else? That is not very good, because you're leaving things to chance. So you need to figure out what you're going to say to them. If they have various objections about the price, or maybe 1 or 2 other things that they might find that they are not comfortable with, you need to have a way for you to respond to their objections. You also need to, aside from handling objections, figure out a way in which you will make them paying for your product or service easier. Set up even a template, a message template, so that once they say, oh, I want to make a payment, you don't dilly-dally. You already have a payment system already set in place, so that once they pay, now you also have the onboarding. So you need to figure out exactly how you're going to convert them. How do you talk to them so that they are able to go along and make the payment that will make them your customer? And even when they become your customer, how do you onboard them? Tell them about the process for you offering the service, how long it's going to take, how do you actually deliver this thing, because it is important for you to build that. And once you do that, now you can move to, of course, the delivery, because I've mentioned to say, now after you do the sales conversion, you figure out exactly what you're going to tell them for them to buy into your thing. You need to now figure out how you're going to do the delivery of the service. Now, there are various things that you can do, and I know you probably are very skilled in whatever you do, and you can do everything in your industry, right? But we are trying to run away from being generalists and doing everything else. So your delivery needs to follow a certain pathway. You need to make the service delivery process as easy as possible, especially if it is something that will involve your customers' direct interaction with you. The delivery process needs to be very easy. It doesn't need to have so many steps. So you need to subtract certain things from your delivery process. If you are doing graphic design, make it maybe a 5-step process, where you start with finding out what type of design they want, and then sitting down with them, create a sketch of the design, you collect their information. There needs to be a predefined process of the way you collect their information, the way you present the first draft, how many edits to their designs can be allowed, because especially when you're looking at things like graphic design, it's not always that they will like the first draft. They might want revision. So there needs to be a cap to say, you know what, okay, this is how we're going to go about this process, and you are allowed to this many edits, so that you don't work for them indefinitely and keep on editing things over and over again. Now, once you figure out the delivery and you have done the entire process for them, you solve the problem that they wanted to be solved, there needs to now be something called getting testimonials, because at the end of the day, you need more people to buy. But if you don't have so much of a reputation, you can ride on testimonials, and those testimonials will be enough for them to want to buy as well and be your customers. So make sure that once you deliver your product or service, There's testimonials that are got from every interaction, and they give you a review, because those reviews will be used in two ways. Number one, for the advertising. When you want to advertise to more people, it will show them to say there is proof that you actually know what you are doing and that you are capable of doing what you're doing. And the number two reason for the testimonials is so that you refine your offer, because trust me, you will not get the offer right away. The first time you create your offer, you won't get it right. You might need to make various edits and remove a lot of unnecessary things and add other things that are key and matter most to the person you want to serve. So you need to get those testimonials, because they will offer you proof. They will act for proof when you're advertising to new people, but they will also give you feedback in terms of where you need to improve and what you need to remove in your process, things that are working as well as the things that are not. This is basically the feedback loop. So now what you need to start tracking is in your business. One of the things that I'm doing is, when I interact with a customer, what happens is I don't just leave it at that. When I get the feedback that I need, I will use the information they provide me to do various things, amongst which is look at where I'm failing, look at where my weaknesses are, and developing on those weaknesses so that there is at least some improvement in the way that I serve them. I will look at the things that they were not satisfied with, and then I will make edits and figure out exactly why they were not satisfied with that. If it was something that is on my part, then I will make sure to improve on that area, because it is something on me. And if it is something that is just them and it has nothing to do with the way I deliver my service, then we leave it at that, because not everyone can be pleased at the end of the day. So there are certain things that you need to pay attention to when you're building your business. Number one is basically the traffic. You need to figure out a way for you to attract your leads, because you can't just depend on word of mouth and people referring you, because it's not always that someone will refer you to another person, especially if you do not ask. So amongst the things that I'm doing right now is I want to make sure that there is a defined lead channel and a way to acquire leads so that my business constantly has traffic. And this is something that you can also do in building your own business. Figure out a way for you to attract leads in a way that feels natural, in a way that doesn't feel forced, in a way that will make life easier for you. The next thing that you need to be able to track is your conversion amongst the people, from the number of people who are contacting you concerning your service. How many are actually becoming customers? Because if the conversion rate is very low, chances are you are doing something wrong in your sales process, in the way you interact with them. When they make that inquiry, there's probably something that you are saying or not doing that is making them unable to pay for your service, to pay for your product. After the conversion rate, you also want to pay attention to the conversations. Where do the conversations start from? How do they end? When you figure out that pathway, you will figure out to say there is a certain drop-off point that is making it very hard for people to constantly come back for the service or to actually commit to paying for the service that you're offering. And you also need to be able to track the results that you're getting them, because at the end of the day, reputation is important. Reputation, very important. It is hard to build a reputation, but very easy to break a reputation. So when you deliver your service really, really well for your people, what happens is you're building a good reputation. But if there are certain areas where you're failing in and you leave those areas unattended to, eventually you might end up gaining a bad reputation. You might do 1,000 things right, but that one thing that you're not doing well, especially if it is of great importance as it relates to your customer, it might end up getting you a bad image in the eyes of people who would have potentially become your customers, or people who were your customers but they can't buy from you again. So you need to pay attention to the results. So now, one thing that I'm trying to pay attention to exactly when going forward is now that you have this business, right? And this is something that I'm doing with myself. Now that I have this business, if I were to start employing people, what would make the service delivery consistent? And this is where you now need to begin to systematize everything that you do. Create a system around client acquisition, create a system around service delivery, create a system around how you interact with your customers, the customer service aspect of things. Have things documented so that even if you were to handle the responsibility yourself, you already know a pathway that you need to follow for it to be consistent throughout the company. And when you now want to start thinking about scaling your business and growing it, having your first employee, when you assign them a task, they will already know what to do because you have already set a predefined system for them to follow, and their responsibilities are already defined. It makes life easier not only for the people you will be hiring, but also for you and your customers, because they will know exactly what to expect from you. So at this point, I'd like to find out from you people if these videos are something you're looking forward to, or if you'd like me to create more of these videos, the long form videos, and I'll be able to create more of this. So kindly comment and let me know what you think about these videos, and if you would love to see more of this, and maybe what topic you would like me to address in the next video.